From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 561. I am Andrew in the forum, Andrew NLSC on X. Joining me as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, we're wrapping up 2024 and gearing up for 2025, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, so on today's show, we will discuss the basketball-related gifts we gave and received during this holiday season, followed by talking about our basketball-related New Year's resolutions. Also, Andrew, I want to point out that Kid Cash and Roger Ward, NBA Live 2001 legend, came up with topic suggestions for a future episode. I want you both to know that I hear you loud and clear. They are great topic suggestions, and they will have their own segments on a future show. But first, Andrew and I played a couple games this holiday season over Parsec, NBA Live 95, where we used the Rockets versus the Spurs, and a game of NBA 2K15, where we used Carmelo Anthony and the Knicks versus Wade's Heat. But let's first, Andrew, talk about that NBA Live 95 session. It had everything.
Yeah.
I love the fast-paced action in that game, the zoomed-out camera view when you hit F8 on the keyboard, and it just gives you a beautiful isometric view of the court, the alley-oops, the shooting, and I love those two teams. It's Akeem's Rockets versus Robinson Spurs, and the only thing I could think of during that game was when David Robinson got his MVP trophy, that kind of miffed Akeem, and Akeem's like, "You're not better than me," and then he took him to school, right?
He took it personally. He pulled an MJ.
Playoff series. He took it personally, exactly. So those are two incredibly classic teams. Of course, Dennis Rodman in that game with his colored hair. He had a dunk on us and a few rebounds and whatnot. It was nostalgia overload. It made me think of a time when I really, really loved the NBA. We were so into it, Andrew.
Yeah.
And yeah, that session was special.
I actually have a Way Back Wednesday coming up on Dennis Rodman's changing hair color in video games. How cool was it whenever you fired up NBA Live 95 and went into a new game, it would randomly select a hair color. And other games did that as well, which is something I'll
You don't even have that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even have that today with Rodman in video games. That's how special that is and how unique that is.
Alternating faces, they were doing that in the 90s, and it's something we've lost. And it's strange because it was a pretty easy way of implementing it, as far as I could tell, having those extra textures and randomly loading them. So obviously it's not technologically impossible, but yeah, such a cool detail in those early games. What a classic matchup, as you said, 95 Rockets versus Spurs. David Robinson, of course, not in NBA Live 95 PC by default. He is added in that NLSC roster, actually overriding Howard Isley. Unfortunately, you can't blank out... Well, no, that's not true. You can blank out portraits in Live 95. It just messes with the season stats if you do. So I need to make an exhibition version of that roster that has the portraits removed, and season mode, you just have to kind of put up with it. But fantastic matchup, as you said. For a game that is 30 years old next year, it was released in March 1995. Amazing. Even without an alley-oop control, look at the lobs we were throwing, Derek.
We had three great alley-oops in that game and some awesome fast breaks. That game has some pretty solid fast break logic.
Yeah.
As far as the way the defense plays the fast break, if a computer player is running with you, how they run the floor and how they space it and everything. It's pretty impressive for the time. And I also want to point out that Rockets team is super special because it has Clyde Drexler on it in that NLSC update, right? And we have Drexler and we have Akeem. And we have Robert Ory, who actually did a lot of damage for us. He was excellent. They have Cassell on the bench, who was just an outstanding player. Kenny Smith starting. Just that Rockets team is incredibly special. I don't think that they win that championship if they hadn't traded for Drexler. I think that he was just unbelievable in that NBA Finals against the Orlando Magic. I want to say he averaged over 20 points per game, was awesome in the rebounds and assist categories and steals, etc., and he was efficient. Clyde Drexler was awesome in that NBA Finals. But yeah, I love that Rockets team.
It's interesting because they didn't finish the year particularly strong after the trade, but his value came in the playoffs. That's why you don't judge a book by its cover. That's why you wait until history is written to judge a team, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, they won the championship as the 6th seed.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
Never underestimate the heart of a champion, as Rudy T said. So it's interesting with Clyde Drexler in Live 95 PC, because it is post-trade deadline from memory. So it does reflect the Drexler for Thorpe trade, but he's on the bench, which he only came off the bench for his first game with the Rockets that season. So it captures a very specific time when they locked the roster. And I love going back to old games and seeing that. Interactive Almanacs, as you know, Derek. But with that specific situation, Drexler as the sixth man only happened once in his debut with the Rockets. Such a specific game to capture for the lineups.
Gotta love that. Jay, I love the uniqueness of video game rosters, and you can find little fun like Easter eggs in a lot of different games as it relates to players that are on the bench that shouldn't be, that ended up starting for the entire season, players that played 1 or 2 games with a team and they were gone after, etc. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
And Phantom Stints, of course, and I've covered a lot of this in Wayback Wednesday and the Friday Five, so I love this trivia, as you know. And Live 95, on a final note, yes, it is almost 30 years old, but such great sim bones, we talked about that in the previous show, very realistic for the technology they had at the time.
Yeah, I mean, defense is fun to play. Blocks are rewarding. The pace is what it should be. It's fast-paced. It's fun. Very strong passing mechanics in that game. Shooting is fun, whether it's straight up and down or on the move, and you can't beat when the commentary is 3, and for some reason that hits. And I love that part of the game, and I also think that just the lighting, the games are alive. I love the presentation. Some of the best presentation in basketball video game history, in my opinion, as far as the menus, the portraits, the key performers, all of that stuff. I love the presentation in those mid-90s NBA Lives.
Tremendous, and because we shared the footage that you recorded, quite a few people mentioning, hey, this looks better than the console version I grew up with. Yeah, so Live 95 PC, Art of Classic, kind of overlooked because people do remember the 16-bit release for Genesis and Super Nintendo, not always the PC version, but it tipped off our modding community back in the day.
There you go. Yeah, and I think that I prefer the PC version of most basketball games over console. NBA Live 95, Live 96, Live 98, Live 99, 2000, etc., even Live 97. Like, I think that the PC versions of those games just have elite presentation. They oftentimes have more options as it relates to things like the camera view, like we mentioned on NBA Live 95, where if you hit F8 on the keyboard, it gives you that zoomed out view, which you can't get on the consoles, etc. So, yeah, I'm not a PC snob, Andrew, no. And I think that console gaming is unbelievable. I've been a console gamer all my life as well, but I do prefer the PC versions of games the majority of the time.
Hey, we're basketball gamers. We'll play basketball games wherever we can find them.
Exactly. Speaking of another basketball game, Andrew, NBA 2K15, we connected for a quick session on that. We used Carmelo Anthony's Knicks versus Wade's Heat, and obviously this is post-LeBron, so Wade and Bosh are there, but you got Josh McRoberts on the Heat there and some other players that weren't on the Big Three Heat. And, yeah, that was a fun session. We got our butts handed to us, to put it lightly. I thought about uploading the video to YouTube, probably like the Christmas Day Massacre or something like that, because I think we lost by 20 to 25 points in only 6-minute quarters. I was rusty on that game. I admitted that during the session because I had been playing NBA 2K25, and NBA 2K15 shares a lot of controls from NBA 2K14, including the post-up button being Y or triangle, depending on which controller you're using, as opposed to a trigger.
Yep.
It has different controls for setting picks. So as opposed to setting a pick with the trigger, you're actually setting pick with the B button. Alley-oops controls are different. It's not the double tap of Y. It's holding down trigger and the shoot button to throw an oop. So there's a lot of differences with controls, and I wasn't posting up properly. I wasn't throwing alley-oops properly. And I think that is part of the reason why we ended up getting in a bit of a hole early, is because I was learning the game all over again. And you and I talked about it after that session, and we were like, yeah, the new control scheme starting with NBA 2K16 is definitely better.
Yes.
Right? Post up with the trigger, double tap, for a fancy pass, B, and double tap Y for an alley oop, all of that stuff. Pick with the trigger. Like, the controls now, whether we like the games as much or not, the controls now make more sense from a button mapping standpoint. But we still had some good moments in that game. I thought I had some nice ISO moves with Melo. You had a couple nice finishes with Amari Stoudemire in the paint off like offensive rebounds and whatnot, and a couple nice post-ups. But yeah, we couldn't stop Wade. I want to say that Wade had 30 points in that game. And I want to point something out about NBA 2K15. That game against the computer is so hard. The CPU is so good. And I want to give people an idea, kind of a comparison to today's NBA 2Ks. NBA 2K15 on Pro is probably the equivalent of NBA 2K25 on Superstar, right? That's how hard the AI is on NBA 2K15. That's how smart they are. That's how often they hit open and contested shots. They are a pain in the butt on that game.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way of putting it, equating Pro to Superstar like that. And like you said, the buttons in NBA 2K16 the very next year, such a huge improvement. And I was quite skeptical at the time. 3 different pass buttons, because, of course, NBA Live 07, 3 different shoot buttons, that didn't work out so well. I mean, NBA Live 07 had a lot of underlying mechanical issues, so even if it had a better control scheme, well, there's only so much you can do with that, with the tech being broken as it was, not properly developed. But yeah, 3 pass buttons has worked out extremely well. There's a reason that control scheme has persisted, prevailed. So that speaks volumes, obviously. But NBA 2K15, like you said, extremely tough, ruthless AI. If you give it any daylight, if you give it any room to drive, it is going to take advantage of that. And Dwayne Wade was even knocking down threes in us. Threes were not Wade's forte. He could make them, but he was certainly making them against us. And just covering up our defense, taking advantage of any lapse that we had. Yeah, that is a very difficult CPU.
2 fun teams, though.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I was still enjoying the NBA at the time, in the mid-2010s. I'd say it probably went south starting in 2016-17.
Yes.
I think that's when it really started going south, when I really started not enjoying the NBA as much. So there's actually a lot of teams in NBA 2K15 that I like. And the thing is with 2K15 is that the gameplay is so close to 2K14 that if you like 2K14, it's impossible not to like the gameplay in 2K15. Right? Like, the controls are very similar, the way the players move, the button mapping, all of that stuff. The biggest downgrade from NBA 2K14 with NBA 2K15 is the lighting. For some reason in NBA 2K15, they went in a very dark direction. Most arenas are incredibly dark. The floors lost reflections. The jerseys aren't as high quality. It looks like the graphics took a dive. And I feel like one of the reasons why I don't put 2K15 on as much as NBA 2K14 is because the game doesn't feel as alive, right? Because of those dark arenas, those dark floors, all of that stuff. I feel like NBA 2K14 is super immersive because of that atmosphere, because of the reflections, the lighting, the crowd interaction, all of that stuff. So I prefer 2K14 over 2K15, but gameplay-wise, they're very close.
Yeah, I think I and the community at large would have to agree with you. 2K14 is still held in very high esteem. This is 2K14 for PS4 and Xbox One, obviously, although the PC version still looks great, to my mind. But yeah, a lot of people have said that the lighting in 2K15 just doesn't hit right. And have you tried any reshades at all for PC?
Yeah, they don't really do it.
Nah.
Because, I mean, you do a reshade, it's not going to give you reflections, right?
Oh,
it's
true.
not going to fix the jersey quality. When you do a reshade, sure, it can brighten things up, but it's hardly ever even, right? It's not the way it's supposed to look. It's like a blanket shade. So even if you brighten it up a little bit, it's not even going to come close to the quality in the balance that NBA 2K14 had. So unfortunately, yeah. The other piece of that too with NBA 2K15 is the crowds are incredibly dark, right? So a reshade isn't going to make those crowds pop either. Like they are in NBA 2K14. I'm not usually a big fan of reshades because most reshades that I've used, actually every reshade that I've used, is basically just been a blanket shade that kind of just makes things look off in general. So, but yeah, 2K14, probably one of the most immersive basketball experiences that you can get.
And of course, NBA 2K15 is still running on that Eco Motion engine, so you have that differentiation in animations that you take the same jump shot 10 times in a row, it's not going to look identical. Subtle differences, obviously, but it's not going to look identical 10 times in a row. And they added some really nice animations. I've been playing through NBA 2K15 my career to finally cover it. Overdue way back Wednesday, all these years later. I'm actually planning that for the 10th anniversary of when you make your debut halfway through the 2015 season in January, Derek. So that'll be coming out late January, that way back Wednesday. But I have been enjoying playing through that as Terry Hansen, obviously, and noticing some really nice animations, some really nice layups. They added some new animations for 2K15 on top of that existing library and Eco Motion. So yeah, while the lighting is obviously disappointing and the overall aesthetic and vibe there, some really nice animations.
Not only that, that's the year they added signature size-ups.
Yes.
So you can actually assign a signature size-up to Terry Hansen, which you were not able to do in NBA 2K14. So yeah, it definitely has a couple advantages as well. But yeah, I would never choose 2K15 over 2K14, if I was put on an island, right? And they were like, you can only bring one NBA 2K and it can either be 2K14 or 2K15. It would definitely, I'd bring 2K14.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So, Andrew, let's get to the first of two community questions. I said, Hoopheads, what basketball-related gifts did you receive this holiday season? And what basketball-related gifts did you give? So I'll throw it over to you first, Andrew. Did you get anything this Christmas related to basketball?
I did. I didn't actually gift anyone anything basketball related. I did give people some things. I was not a Scrooge about that. But the only basketball related gift that I got was the annual Michael Jordan calendar. Now, people might say, a calendar? Don't you have a phone? Don't you have a computer? Obviously, yes. And I put my schedule in my phone, in my Google Calendar. But I still like having that thing on the wall, Derek. I still like having that decoration on the wall, seeing the photos they've chosen, flipping it over each month. So yeah, the MJ calendar was my basketball-related gift this year.
Yeah, and you actually shared a picture of that on social media. That is incredibly high quality. However, I will say that my cat calendar is equally high quality, Andrew. So we have a cat, like I've talked about before. In fact, maybe some of our listeners have heard him meow in the background during some of our shows. Right now, he is laying on my legs. But we've had him for 3 years, and for all 3 years, one of the gifts to our home, one of the gifts to ourselves is a cat calendar. So it's 12 months of images of our cat, and each month it's a special picture, and we love it. So you got Jordan, I got my cat, but they both hold value to us.
I mean, neither of them are a Garfield calendar, or indeed a Garfield cart calendar, but what are you going to do?
Garfield cart, by the way, is still sitting in my Steam inventory. And I'm thinking that we should actually have a session on that. And maybe we create an alternate YouTube channel for non-basketball video games and upload it there. But yeah, if you haven't played Garfield Kart, you're sorely missing out.
Definitely check it out.
So for me, I received an Evolution basketball. We were talking about, getting a basketball and how that's special no matter what, whether you're a new player or you've been playing all your life and whatnot. And this was a big deal for me this Christmas because recently somebody stole my basketball after a long day of pickup. So I actually needed one. And the Evolution basketballs are awesome. It's the primary basketball that we use in local leagues. Whenever I play pickup on Saturday mornings, there's multiple Evolution basketballs that get brought to the gym, and we always use one of those for the day's session. So, yep, I got that, and that is awesome. I also got my brother Mark 3 Caitlin Clark rookie cards, a Caitlin Clark hoodie and jersey, 2 pairs of and 1 basketball shoes, and a pack of WNBA cards. So my oldest brother is a huge Caitlin Clark fan. He actually went to Indiana to watch a Caitlin Clark home game. And he said that was an amazing experience. He had great seats. And the game he went to is the game where she broke the rookie 3-point record. So he'll never forget that experience. But yeah, he's a big fan. And the and 1 basketball shoes that I got him. So my brother has always loved wearing and 1. And he actually didn't realize that they had started making basketball shoes again, like real, like good basketball shoes. And the pair that I got him is actually called Scope. They're and 1 Scope, and they're mids. And he tried them on, and he is absolutely in love with them. The shoes have all the technology that he needs in a basketball shoe, and it has the support that he wants, and they have great traction and whatnot. So he was wearing a really, really cheap pair of basketball shoes. So this is a massive upgrade for him. And as you know, and 1 used to be big in the basketball shoe space. A lot of NBA players were wearing and 1 basketball shoes, including Kobe. Kobe Bryant wore them for a bit. Sean Marion and countless other NBA players, Stephon Marbury, etc. So it's nice to see that and 1 is back in the basketball shoe game and making some quality shoes.
Awesome gifts all around. But that's really rotten that somebody stole your basketball. I mean, obviously, when one plays basketball on the court, you expect to have the defender try and steal the ball. But after the game, that's just low.
Well, they don't know it's mine, more than likely. I think a lot of times people just either they pick up the wrong ball or they say, hey, this ball looks nice, and they walk off with it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like I have no enemies at the court, but I should have put my name on it. And I learned my lesson, and I am writing with a Sharpie on this new basketball my name, so hopefully it doesn't get stolen again, because those Evolution balls are not cheap, right? That's a really nice gift. So, I plan on protecting that one. So, Andrew, let's get to the community responses. We received only a couple. It seemed like people didn't really want to talk about the gifts they received or gave, but we got a lot more responses to the New Year's resolution question, which is coming up. But Stephen at the Live King states, my nephew got a mini indoor hoop with 2 basketballs, 1 for indoor and 1 for outdoor. My family gave me candy. Dude, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, were you ever into mini hoops? Were you ever into, I'm talking about kind of similar to what you see like at the arcade, right? Did you ever want to own one of those, or did you ever own one of those at home, or were you not interested in those?
I guess not interested to the point of really being passionate about getting one. So I never actually owned one. Have had some pretty good mini hoops that you hang on the door. A fairly sizable one back in the day. We had one when I worked at a internet company. We actually had one hanging up in the text room at the back and would shoot around on that sometimes. So I ended up getting one at home as well. And that's as close as I've got to mini basketball. Obviously a mini hoop. I'll have to see if I can dig out a photo of that one. But those were a lot of fun in the arcades. Obviously, I'll always remember when my cousin Clinton and I went to the local arcade and a couple of older boys showed us how to cheat the system by going up to the rim and wiggling the net so that it registered more and getting more tickets.
There you go. When we were little, the tickets were a big thing.
Yeah.
Right? When we were kids.
The prizes sucked everywhere.
You're right. They're like hanging out of your pockets, right?
Yeah.
And you're getting as many as you possibly can. And then you bring them up and you realize you can only get a really small thing because those places were cheap. So for me, we had a mini Celtics hoop when I was little. and we had a Nerf ball. And I talked about this a little bit on a prior NLSC episode, but we absolutely loved this thing. And when we were little, we actually had to like jump to dunk or like lay it in. This hoop was tall enough where you weren't shooting down, you were actually shooting up. And we absolutely loved it. The Nerf ball for the hoop was roughly the same size as a real basketball, and we used to pretend to be our favorite NBA players shooting on that hoop. When we moved into a new house, when we got a little bit older, the hoop ended up being down in the cellar, which ended up being kind of like another living area. And there was more room to run around and dunk on it and pretend to play real games and play one-on-one and all of that stuff. So yeah, I loved that mini hoop, and it got a lot of use when I was a kid. The next response is from SPXCELY on Discord. He states, well, my Lakers won yesterday, so that's one gift I got. Did you watch any of the NBA games on Christmas?
I must admit I didn't.
I did not either. I heard a little bit about it. But yeah, glad your Lakers won.
And of course, Austin Reeves, I do know, I saw some highlights on social media, hit that game-winning layup. So yeah, certainly a great Christmas gift for him there. And jumping over to Facebook, Chad shared a few Atlanta Hawks-related gifts that he received, Derek. He says, this sweet Josh Smith, a.k.a. J Smooth Atlanta Hawks retro jersey from his rookie season. Very cool. A 95-96 Atlanta Hawks retro warm-up jacket. You remember the branding they brought in that season with the gradient and the big hawk, Derek. And also a couple of caps, a baseball cap and a beanie, or a toque, as you may call it if you're in Canada.
What is your favorite Hawks branding?
You know, it's probably because I was getting into the NBA and really getting into the NBA at the time. But honestly, probably the mid-90s when they adopted that new look for 96.
I would say that's probably my favorite as well. And the person that I think of immediately is Steve Smith.
Yes.
So Steve Smith having his all-star season, probably the best stretch of his career, being their number one scorer, all of that stuff. That Hawks branding, I would say, is probably my favorite, and just one of many great looking jerseys during that time frame. Around that time, obviously, we had the amazing Grizzlies jerseys, the Raptors, the Pistons jerseys, the Suns, like countless, the Rockets pajama jerseys, which I personally loved.
Same.
And whatnot. Yeah, I could go down the list. Like, most of the NBA jerseys at that time are awesome.
You shared that image in the NLSC Discord. What is your favorite 90s jersey or alternate jersey from memory? And that's hard because there are many great designs, period, in the 90s, but there were some really great third jerseys, alternate jerseys, whatever we used to call them back in the day. Sunday jerseys as well was another name we threw out because a lot of teams did wear them on Sundays. And yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people would say that the Dominic Wilkins era Hawks jersey is the best or their favourite. That is the one from the early 80s through to around about 1992 when they had that short-lived design through the early to mid-90s. But yeah, I do love that 96 Hawks jersey, just so unique. And that's what made those mid-90s jerseys so special.
Well, a lot of people like the 95-96 Supersonics rebrand.
I do.
The best, right? But for me, I actually prefer the jerseys they had before it and the Sonics jerseys that they had in the late 80s. I also prefer the court designs from back then. So yeah, I think the majority of people are like you though, and they prefer that rebrand in 95, 96. Plus that holds a special place in your heart as well. I mean, they played the Bulls that year in the finals. That was the first full year you were able to watch Michael Jordan in his return, and that's the year probably that made you the Bulls fan that you are today and the MJ fan that you are today. So I'm sure that there's also a lot of nostalgia around that choice.
Oh, undoubtedly.
So, Andrew, let's get to the last segment for today's show. It's the second community question. I said, Hoopheads, what are your basketball and or basketball video game related New Year's resolutions? Basically, what are your goals for 2025? And I'll start this one off, Andrew. So I'll go down the list real quick. To not get hurt in 2025. I want to keep playing basketball for years to come. Obviously, I came off of major knee surgery earlier this year in February of 2024, and I'm already back playing in leagues. I'm back playing pickup, but I don't want to have any setbacks. I don't want to have any more serious injuries. So that's number one. Number two, to win another league championship with my brother. Hopefully we win the league that we're in right now. We have a chance. We will see. We have another league that starts up in the spring. So if we can't get it done in this league, hopefully the next one. To finish the Ultimate Classic Teams roster for NBA 2K19 that my brother and I are working on, and to help Stildo for that same game get his retro seasons up to the 07-08 season. That's his goal. He was a big Celtics fan. 07-08 is the last Celtics championship. That's when he might stop with his retro season rosters. So I've been working on draft classes for him and trying to get the other seasons ready and whatnot. So hopefully we can finish that project together in 2025. Also, I'd like to get back into modding. I'd like to start making cyber faces again. I will be modding NBA 2K19 to finish that project, but I'd like to get back into making faces. So when I say get back into modding, specifically making cyber faces. For what game? I don't know, but that is one of my goals. And lastly, to finish Road Trip with you on NBA Jam on Fire Edition. We're almost 70% through on my Xbox One. And to start a season with you on a past game. I'd like us to start a co-op season versus the CPU. We'll have to choose a game, but I'd like to get one started in 2025.
Oh, I love those resolutions across the board. I've been thinking about that myself. We definitely have to finish Road Trip. And yes, I've been thinking about suggesting starting a season as well. Like you say, we just have to pick a game. We have so many to choose from. Obviously, some standbys, some classics that we'd love to revisit together. So we will have to figure out one to start that in and find out whether we want to do that with mods or whatever. Love that you're getting back into modding. I will be doing that too, as I will get into in a moment. But we actually played a game with your 1986 roster as well in NBA 2K19, and that was a really fun session.
Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot about that session. That was really good. We actually used the 85-86 roster for NBA 2K19. And how complete is that with all the Dornas?
Amazing.
All the players, the signature shots and the attributes and all of that stuff. We used the 76ers with Barkley, Irving, Moses Malone, Bob McAdoo, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks. That team is so stacked, Andrew. They're such a fun video game team. And we used them against the Knicks with Patrick Ewing. You may have noticed that Bill Cartwright wasn't in the lineup, and that's because I believe he only played one game that season, and he got hurt, and he was out for the rest of the season. So I don't have him in the lineup there, but it's Patrick Ewing and Louis Orr and Rory Sparrow. Very strange Knicks team because of their injuries. But yeah, that session was a lot of fun, a lot of great dunks with Irving, bunch of pickpockets with Maurice Cheeks, some nice steals. You had a really nice two-handed dunk, which is very realistic, with young Barkley. Andrew Toney went off for us in, I want to say, the third quarter and hit a bunch of jump shots. So he hit a three, bunch of mid-range shots, etc. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I can't believe I forgot about that session.
We'll have to play with that roster more, and we'll definitely talk about it on the podcast, obviously. As I said, I too want to get back into some modding. I've been dabbling with that. Actually just released my 2005 roster for the Xbox 360 version of NBA 2K6, Derek, rolling it back a year. That is so much fun. Rolling back a game, just a single year, being able to take advantage of that next-gen version, what was then the next-gen release of NBA 2K, rolling it back to ESPN NBA 2K5's rosters. Shout out to WizCard Rush for helping out with some last-minute testing before releasing that, just to make sure that the file was properly copied and able to be re-signed and copied to somebody else's Xbox 360. So be sure to check that out in our download section. So I want to do more stuff like that, Derek. The ABA roster for Live 06, some other rosters for Live 06. Basically just want to create some projects that interest me. Classic favorite games that I want to play, making some mods for them so that we can play them together and obviously put up the footage. So that's something I'll be doing more in 2025. With my features, I want to keep expanding them. I want to visit some ideas that I've had for a long time and finally get around to them. I've got an NBA Street home court retrospective that I'm putting together, a video retrospective. Want to do some more of those. Want to revisit the idea of dipping into the collection every week and playing a game that I haven't played as much. I did do that at the beginning of last year, Derek, as you may recall, but that kind of petered out after a while. Want to make a better effort to select a game each and every week and play that and talk about it, and obviously connect with you on those games as well, and we can talk about them here on the show. And as far as real basketball is concerned, I'm not quite in the condition to play in a league at the moment, but as I said on a previous show, want to get down to that park that has some basketball courts now and shoot around and get back into it.
That's what I'm most excited about for you. I'd love for you to get back into playing for real, even if it's not playing in a league, right? Maybe it's playing some casual pickup or just getting down there 3 times a week, right? And shooting shots for a half hour or 45 minutes. I think it's great for the brain. Like, I think it's great for people's mentals, right?
Yep.
I think it's a great stress reliever. I think that it's fun just watching the ball go through the net, right? I'm, a little older now, obviously, but sometimes I'll be out there and I'll be shooting around and I'll still pretend that I'm in a league game, right?
Yeah.
Or I'll still pretend like I'm an NBA player, et cetera, and the clock is, going down and, we're hitting a buzzer shot, right? So that stuff has never left me. I love basketball just as much as I did when I was a child. And the way I approach basketball is very similar. So I would love to see you get back into shooting around.
I'm definitely going to give it a go. And 2 other resolutions that came to mind, actually, also want to make an effort to watch at least one current game per week. Sometimes there are weeks go by when I don't watch any because of how I feel about the current NBA. But look, I'll give it a go, at least one game a week, and also make sure that I rewatch at least one classic game every week. Speaking
of watching classic NBA, over Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we watched 3 classic games. We watched 79-80, and it was actually the 1980 playoffs, 76ers versus Celtics. So that was the Celtics team that had Larry Bird, Dave Cowens, and Pete Maravich. They also had Cedric Maxwell and Nate Archibald, etc., Chris Ford. And it was versus, obviously, the Dawkins 76ers. So Dawkins, Irving, Bobby Jones, etc. We also watched Celtics versus Knicks, 96-97, Andrew. At the time, the Celtics were 9-30 when that game was being played. And they actually finished the season 15-67, so they even got worse after that game. They played them tight. They ended up losing in a close one there, but they had a bunch of injuries. D. Brown wasn't even starting at that point. Dino Roger was hurt. Dana Barros was hurt. And basically the entire first quarter for the Celtics offense was Eric Williams isolations.
Wow.
That's how desperate the Celtics were. But get this, he was isolating on Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing was his primary defender in that quarter, and Eric Williams actually put up like 15 first quarter points. It was pretty impressive, that performance. But I'll tell you one thing. If your team is using Eric Williams ISOs as your primary offensive option, you may have a weak team. So, anyway, watch that. That was interesting. Allen Houston obviously was on the Knicks at that time. Larry Johnson without the beard because he had just joined that franchise. He played pretty well in that game. They still had Oakley. Starks was coming off the bench. Interesting Knicks team. And then the other game that we watched, which was super entertaining, was 2004-2005 season game between the Supersonics with Rashard Lewis, Ray Allen, Luke Ridnour, Jerome James, super interesting Supersonics team, versus the high-powered Phoenix Suns with Nash, Joe Johnson, Amari Stoudemire, and Sean Marion. And what a fast-paced, fun game. A lot of threes went up, but nothing compared to what goes up today. Jerome James, actually, and I might share this highlight on social media, Jerome James had this awesome one-handed hammer dunk on the fast break to start the game. And, like, if I did that in a video game against my brother, he would be so mad at me because it's Jerome James, right?
Yeah.
But he looked like Daryl Dawkins out there on that jam. But, yeah, those are the 3 games I watched recently over Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
That's really cool. And if you do look, you can find a lot of classic games from decades of the NBA on YouTube. I kind of almost don't want to recommend specific channels, Derek, because they'll get taken down. You almost don't want to bring attention to them. You want them to be this kind of secret that's passed around quietly between longtime fans who love classic games. But they're definitely out there. So find a date, find a matchup, and search, and you'll find them.
Exactly. Just put in the year and the team. So put in, like, I don't know, 1991 Trailblazers. And you can put full game at the end of it, the YouTube search, and you'll get some full games that you could watch. But yeah, I'm not going to list any of the YouTube names. I'm not going to shine a light on those channels because, honestly, like you stated, I don't want them to get shut down. I want those games to stay up.
Should put together a secret Google Doc and just share it between the community.
Seriously. So, Andrew, let's get to the community responses. Let's get to what their New Year's resolutions are as it relates to basketball. Steven at the Live King states, hopefully the run comes out and is fun. LOL. We need another b-ball game that's fun. I want to enjoy basketball gaming again. So obviously we talked about the run, which has some NBA Street developers behind it, that they talked about initially releasing it as an online only game with no local multiplayer option. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully it gets released with some local multiplayer options, and maybe for PC, maybe we get some modding capabilities as well. I do hope it's a hit. It would be great to have another street game that is fun and accessible and people enjoy, like the old NBA Street games. But I'm not optimistic because of the talk about how heavily online focused it is, the fact that there is no NBA license, etc. So we will see what happens with that.
Yeah, like we said when we talked about it on the show, we will obviously keep tabs on it and hope for the best, but there are a few things going against it. But also, you look back at some games like Street Hoops, for example, that was then followed by And One Street Ball, that they kind of laid the foundation with that first game, and then were able to get a license, and won in that case, and flesh out that game and add some more features. So look, if that is a success, then maybe that studio can follow it up with an even better game.
Exactly, and hopefully they don't sell out to NBA 2K like NBA Playgrounds did.
Ugh.
Right? Like, I think that killed that series.
It did.
Right,
Yeah.
so hopefully 2K doesn't try to come in and give them an offer they can't refuse, and then all of a sudden the game becomes even more predatory and it turns everybody off. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Him at Shrek2 Fanboy says, actually a more real life goal, but I want to take my rec skills to the next level. Spent the last year and change just getting in shape and putting in work to play again. But now I'm trying to actually be more of a quality role player. We'll see how this turns out by next year. Andrew, can I just say that I love that?
Yeah, same.
So listen, I love playing in local leagues. The competition is awesome. Everybody takes it seriously. You have standings, you have stats, you have write-ups for the games, you have, the team chemistry piece, you have a bunch of unique players in the league. I absolutely love playing. And listen, I love playing in local leagues as much as I like playing in high school. That's how awesome it is, right? And the fact that I can also enjoy it with my brother just makes it 10 times better. But the point is that I love the fact that not only does he take it seriously, but that he's still, as an adult, trying to improve his game, trying to make himself a more quality player in these leagues, trying to, make it so possibly that he gets more minutes and that he's able to help out a team more, etc. I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely. And that attitude already puts him ahead of most rec players in NBA 2K, and probably a few rec players in real life as well.
Exactly. There's so many players, Andrew, that I've played against, and I've played against them sometimes for over a decade. Their games never change. In fact, a lot of times these players fall off, right? They're like not as good as they once were and all of that stuff. So it's cool if he can find some improvements in his game and make it so, he's more happy with the way he plays and how he can contribute. Hopping over to the Discord now. Vetman states, release My League eras. So I don't know exactly what that project is. I'm going to have to reach out to him, but I'm thinking that it's probably related to completing eras rosters and maybe creating seasons that are not in the game, kind of like a UBR, URB type setup. So I'll reach out to him on that. Juicy Shack Meat states, I honestly haven't revisited my basketball video games too much due to focusing on soccer titles this past 2024. I definitely need to return to the virtual hardwood and the live Street 2K, Konami, and Sega titles for my New Year's resolution. So he would like to focus more on basketball gaming. And, that's a good goal. And it sounds like he wants to, revisit not only 2K titles, not only live titles, but he wants to go back and maybe play some NBA in the Zone, right? Some of the Konami titles, NBA in the Zone 2. Maybe he wants to throw on a game I don't recommend, ESPN NBA Tonight. Maybe he wants to play that one. Maybe he'll get more enjoyment out of it than I do. Maybe he wants to jump into the NBA Shootout Series or NBA Inside Drive. There's so many basketball games out there. We would know, we have huge collections. There's so many basketball games out there to enjoy. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're all about basketball gaming here at the NLSC and on the NLSC podcast, so we definitely support that goal.
And Careless XCI states, I'm planning to do another season controlling all teams and playing all games, just like I did with 2K23 recently, 14 games per team, 3-minute quarters. Haven't decided which game or season yet, but I'm currently leaning toward 2K13 with the original roster. I hope he chooses 2K13 because that game produces amazing highlights, Andrew.
Yeah.
And Careless XCI has been in the top 10 a bunch of times based on that 2K23 activity. I also like the fact that his goal is to complete seasons, right? And be part of each one of the games. And the way that he can do that, the way he can find a way to fit it into his schedule is by doing shorter games, like 3-minute quarters, right? And whatnot. I don't think a lot of people like to do that because of the stat accumulation, right? Because when you're doing a My League, a My NBA, a season, a franchise, etc., stats are oftentimes for a lot of people on the front of the brain. That tracking, are the stats realistic? Who's doing what. And I just love the fact that for him, it's all about the progression. It's all about finishing that season. It's about the standings. It's about the highlights. It's about the moments, right? So it's a different way to look at playing a season on a video game, but it's definitely effective for him.
And I have to admit that I kind of envy his ability to do that, because whenever I play a season, Derek, I want to play 12-minute quarters, 82 games, play every game, not simulate. I have simulated at times. When I was younger, my cousin and I played a 28 game in NBA Live 2000 to finish the season, because he was only going to be here for 2 weeks, so we wanted to compress it. So I have done it, but as far as seasons where I'm playing by myself and can pick them up and drop them at will, I have to play 82 games in 12-minute quarters. So I do envy Carolus for that ability to play those shorter quarters and get through those multiple seasons and just have that all-around great experience where he's playing with different teams. Now, it's a really great approach.
I only did that type of season on one past video game, and I talked about this probably, 250 episodes ago. On NBA in the Zone 2, I did a full season using the Detroit Pistons, and I went all the way through the playoffs and everything, and I did 2-minute quarters. And it's because I wanted to play through a whole season, watch how the standings turned out, see if I could win the championship, etc. And I do remember having great moments with that season. That season was a lot of fun. Sure, the stats didn't look great, right? The stats weren't realistic, but the standings looked good. And there were definitely a lot of great highlights that took place. So I see where he's coming from, and I can see how that's fun.
Definitely, and I do think that game is better with shorter quarters. I mean, I do appreciate the game for what it is. I do appreciate that style of gameplay more these days, having revisited it all these years later. But I do think that 12-minute quarters in those games, those in-the-zone games, it's a bit much.
It's way too much. There's certain games where if you do 48 minutes games, you'll want to tear your eyeballs out.
Yeah, too repetitive. Yeah,
it's way too repetitive. The game just doesn't grip you for that long period of time. And that's not saying that NBA in the Zone 2 is a bad game, but there is no way in hell I'd be able to get through a season 12-minute quarters on that game.
No, for sure. It's just the style of gameplay lends itself to those shorter quarters. Jumping over to Facebook now, Tyler says, just play as many retro NBA games as possible. So kind of like Juicy Shackmate there. And once again, absolutely support that goal. And like I said, Derek, I do want to revisit that idea of playing at least one game in my collection that I haven't spent as much time with, at least one per week, and in doing so, produce Wayback Wednesday features on them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'd also like to connect with the community a little bit more. I haven't been doing it as much as I'd like, but there's quite a few people on the NLSC Discord that like to connect on these games, and I'd like to get back into that.
Jared says, my goal is to explore some more of the Pat the Head mod for NBA 2K13. That, and potentially start using that mod to make my own little dream rosters for offline consumption. And Pat the Head is doing some excellent work with 2K13, Derek. Not sure if you've seen that in the forum, but it's a comprehensive roster project, including current rosters for NBA 2K13, plenty of retro rosters, some ABL rosters, NBL rosters, ABA rosters, just covering the history of basketball, Olympic rosters as well, just putting some tremendous detail into that, doing some great write-ups as well, talking about the history of the sport, which I love to see. With my 2005 roster, Derek, I showed you the manual that I put for that. The README actually kind of went into some detail there. I want to do that for my rosters moving forward. Bring back those manuals that we love to read for video games in general, not just basketball games, video games in general back in the day. Yeah, Pat the Head's doing some excellent work. Check that out in the forum. And I love that idea of taking someone's roster and making some changes and putting together some custom scenarios just for your own personal use.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it on the forums, and I've seen the buzz around it and the amount of detail he puts into it. He truly loves classic basketball, not just the NBA, right? The ABA, etc. He loves classic hoops. And I also want to point out again, that's just more love for NBA 2K13. I've seen a lot of love for that game recently, more than usual. So it's nice to see that people are enjoying that title.
And of course, the ABL, Derek, the American Basketball League, the first league to have a three-point line. The league, of course, founded by Abe Saperstein, who also created the Harlem Globetrotters. And finally, Roger Ward, one of the Live at One legends, of course, says, "My goal is to start 2 more 2024-2025 roster mods in NBA Live 2005. You can create 45 players, so each project makes 4 teams. Nate and I also plan to revisit Live 2003 and 06. And I love that. I love the minimalist projects. I love that he's not letting the creative player limit stop him from making multiple rosters just to play different matchups. I actually have a roster that I put together for 2K6, Derek. Not going to release it because it's nowhere near complete. It's the 97 Bulls and 97 Rockets. I will share the footage of the game that I played with that. But I love these little projects, just creating scenarios, not letting limitations like that, like, oh, the jerseys are wrong, or the shorts aren't long enough for a retro roster, or you can only create so many players. Just working with what you've got to set up some fun scenarios and enjoying yourself on the virtual hardwood. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's great. I also want to point out that the NBA Live 2005 footage that they upload, I've watched every game, I think. And you know that because you see their clips in the top 10. That's me going through their YouTube channel, watching their highlights and picking out the best ones for the top 10. So Roger and Nate, you probably already know this by now, but yeah, I watch all of your content. But I think that their NBA Live 2005 gameplay videos are the most entertaining. More entertaining than their Live 2001 videos, Live 2003, Live 2004. And I think it's just the way the game plays, but also just the way they go at each other in that game. Just watching Nate dunk on Roger over and over and over again with Tim Duncan was laughable and at the same time incredibly entertaining. And just watching the back and forth between them, Roger attacking him with Kobe and all of that stuff, and just the way they play and use all the controls and try to use players to their strengths and all of that stuff. I love watching their Live 2005 footage.
Yeah, that fake and spin on the drop step with Duncan to the dunk was beautiful.
I thought I was watching the primed Akeem Olajuwon, to be completely honest with you. Nate definitely overachieved with Tim Duncan in that game.
So a lot of great responses from the community, as always, Derek. Some great plans for 2025 for basketball and basketball gaming. And look, I'm excited about our ideas as well. And obviously looking forward to creating more content with you and enjoying that love of basketball and basketball gaming and sharing that with the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a New Year's resolution, a goal for Andrew and I is to, once again, never miss a week with this show. You know, produce an NLSC podcast every single week for the community. Plus, we just love doing the show in general anyway. But also to keep the YouTube channel incredibly active, right? And keep the Discord active and keep the forum active. So, yeah, those are yearly goals for us.
Absolutely. We'll be bringing you that content, providing you those platforms. So please join us and, again, join in our love of basketball and basketball gaming. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show and the 2024 season of the NLSC Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us throughout the year. Please join us again in 2025. Lots more fun to come. So thank you for tuning in. Please join us again next week and every week on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. You can also reach me on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. And before we wrap up here, Derek, I will share Lutz's immortal words that he used to post every New Year's Eve. Remember the safest order of things on New Year's Eve, fireworks first and then drink, and not vice versa. So thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.